Hey guys, this is Robbie Krieger from The Doors, and you're listening to Appetite for Distortion.
You know where you are. I said it.
This is Appetite for Distortion.
And welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion. My name is Brando, episode 226, and we have a big show for you today. Coming up a little bit later, we're going to welcome back to the podcast author Greg Renoff, author of Van Halen Rising. He also did the biography of Van Halen producer Ken Templeman, and we're going to talk about Eddie Van Halen. I want to do an Eddie Van Halen. I want to have an Eddie Van Halen conversation and give it justice, because I'm just not as educated about Eddie and Van Halen as Greg is. While I'm a fan of Van Halen, like all of you, I want to talk to an expert and kind of pick his brain. And I'm just looking for, and I appreciate Greg's time, because obviously he's been so busy. He's been writing articles. He's been doing other interviews, of course, in the wake of Eddie's passing. So I'm glad and very appreciative of his time. So we're going to get Greg Renoff a little bit later on in the podcast. But first, we got to welcome in the star of the show. I mean, I said this, and I'll say it again right now to Robbie Krieger. The Doors mean so much to me. Yes, this is a Guns N' Roses podcast. Obviously, Guns N' Roses is my favorite band, but the Doors, they're probably number two, honestly. There's a connection between me and my dad with the Doors. I didn't listen. He had some records, some LPs, but he mainly was like a CD guy. And before I could buy my own CDs, I would take his, and I would take Morrison Hotel. I would take the Soft Parade. That was my introduction to rock and roll. And, you know, whenever we would listen to, and it's crazy that I work there now, Q104.3 in New York City, whenever a Doors song, I would remember him, we're driving around and him cranking the Doors and blasting it. So, I guess I don't want to get too sentimental and sad, but now I wish he was here to, especially to hear this interview right now. But let's not go too deep down that route. We could save that maybe for another time. Without further ado, we got to welcome the legendary guitarist Robbie Krieger from The Doors, and today he's promoting the 50th anniversary deluxe edition of Morrison Hotel. This thing is loaded. 2 CD, 1 LP set. It expands their fifth studio album. I can't believe that's their fifth album, and they were still so strong. Over an hour of unreleased session outtakes. Whoa. So you got to hear how they the songs evolved to make the album, to make Morrison Hotel. So, and there's an unreleased take of Peace Frog and Blue Sunday. So it's available today. It's available now digitally from Rhino Records. So without further ado, Robbie Krieger, welcome to the AFD show.
Hello.
Hey, Robbie. How are you today?
I'm pretty good, man.
I got to say, this is an honor is an understatement. I know you're here. We're talking about the 50th anniversary of Morrison Hotel. Came out in 1970. I know you know this already. But I was born in 1983, but I got to tell you, Morrison Hotel, The Doors, was my introduction to rock and roll through my late father. And I still remember him putting on Morrison Hotel, Roadhouse Blues, of course, first track. And he points out, between singing, and he says, "Do it, Robbie, do it." And he wants me to pay attention to that line because he just loved the feel of The Doors. So just to say, this just means so much. So I appreciate your time today, because, well, I guess the first question is, what does it mean? 50 years later, of course, The Doors have been around for longer than that. When someone my age or even younger says how much The Doors and the music you wrote means to them, does that still blow you away, or are you used to that by now?
No, it still blows me away, especially when young people come up to me and tell me stuff like that, Like I get, 10, 12-year-olds that, and I ask them, what was your parents' the Doors fan? And they go, no, I just, my friend at school told me about it. Or, so it's still working today. Amazing.
It really is. And again, it was my dad. It was one of the few bands both my dad and my mom agreed upon, because he was rock and roll, Doors and Zeppelin, and she was doo-wop. But the Doors, that's who I grew up with.
Wow.
It is. I mean, I got to see the Doors of the 21st century, with Ian Asper.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess I want
Where was that?
That was at Jones Beach, Long Island.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember that one.
So, I mean, because you've obviously had a lot of, you've worked with so many different artists over the years, collaborating. So I guess one question is, because I was just looking this up, someone sent me a video, Roadhouse Blues that you did with Scott Weiland. So if you can remember, this was, I believe in 2000. So I'm just curious, do you remember, unfortunately, another lead singer who left us too soon, what it was like playing with Scott?
That was great. In fact, it was his whole band was there, and they played on this. It was like a Doors tribute band, or maybe you're thinking of the TV show, the Storyteller.
This was the House of Blues L.A. that I'm looking at, and
House of.
Yeah, it was with Stone Temple Pilots. It was with the whole band. Okay,
gotcha. Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, he was a big Doors fan, and he played on quite a few of our little, like I said, he did this TV show, Storytellers, with us, and I sat in with those guys at a couple of concerts. Where was it? Bonnaroo, I think. And those are cool guys, and my friend Robert DeLeo is the bass player for Stone Temple Pilots, has done a lot of stuff with us too.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I mean, obviously, so it's great that when you love these, I mean, I look at them as bands who I grew up with technically, but they're fans of yours. These big rock stars are fans of yours. So what I love on this reissue of Morrison Hotel, we're hearing these cover versions of music that you loved. So going back even further. So can you talk to me a little bit about B.B. King? Because you guys you jammed on Rock Me, and he's another one of just the greats. I did get a chance to see B.B. thankfully before he passed away.
Good, yeah, he's great. Well, Ray Manzarek grew up in Chicago, so he used to go see Muddy and Howlin' Wolf and all those guys, quite often. And one time he asked to sit in. I think it was with Muddy, but he didn't get the job. At least he asked. And then I remember one time we were in Chicago, and Ray took us all to see Howlin' Wolf. And boy, that was amazing.
Wow. Is there, because I still, obviously we want to focus, we can go so many different ways, and I know we're short on time. Is there a favorite song that you wrote that's on Morrison Hotel? Is it Peace Frog? Is it, what's your favorite, or does it change? Has it changed throughout over the years?
Yeah, actually on this album, I didn't write any of the words. It's all Jim Morrison's words, but I wrote a lot of the music. And Peace Frog is probably my favorite one. I had the music for that all done, and I couldn't think of any words, and I asked Jim, to write some words for it, and he wasn't coming up with anything. So finally, he looked in his book, in his notes that he always kept with him. A lot of stuff was way early, like he wrote even in high school and stuff. And he found this poem called Abortion Stories. And if you listen to the words, Peace Frog, you can tell it's about an abortion, blood in the streets in the town of Chicago, and chicane. You wouldn't think when you first heard it that it was about an abortion, but so anyway, we obviously couldn't call it abortion stories. I guess we could have, but it would be kind of weird. So he came up with somehow Peace Frog. There's nothing to do with the song,
Wow.
But I love it.
I'm today years old when I found that out. I had no idea because, as much as I love Jim's voice and lyrics, it's the music right away. It's your music that grabs me from each of all these songs, because a lot of times, just like now, I didn't understand what Jim was writing about or talking about. I still loved it, but it was the music that grabbed me first. Another artist, I'm curious, like when you play with, not just like a singer, because I know you've worked with different singers and joining people on stage, but other guitarists. I was looking through some photos of you guys jamming on the Doors' 40th anniversary. So when that happens,
all right.
Yeah. So when that happens, as accomplished as Slash is, does he look at you and try to learn from you? Does he pick your brain, or is it vice versa? Maybe, or do you guys just jam out? How does that work?
I wish I had more time to hang out with Slash because when we played, what was that? It was in the only time I really played with him, jammed with him was. It was a thing in Denver, I think, and it was kind of an ode to Janis Joplin. So we were doing all the Janis Joplin songs.
Okay.
So I couldn't really. I was trying to watch what he was doing and stuff, but one of these days I'm gonna hang out with him and pick his brain.
Okay, that's interesting that you say you want to pick his brain, because I would look at him. And thinking that because he's also a student of the instrument, would want to pick yours, considering you paved the way, kind of for a bit. So it's funny, you're so humble. Like, do people like Slash or do they say that you paved the way, and you're just like, no, I'm just a dude playing guitar still all these years later?
I think guitar players are pretty. They won't let you know, stuff like that. Although I was with the guy from Toto the other day, Steve Lukather.
Oh, yeah.
And
Steve Lukather.
And he was telling me about, how he used to listen to all my stuff and get some ideas from it and stuff. That was pretty cool.
Just incredible. I hope I get to speak with you for, and pick your brain. For longer, because you've obviously accomplished so much, but obviously the Morrison Hotel, the 50th anniversary, that we're celebrating this iconic album all these years later that has affected people like me who weren't alive, unfortunately, to see the Doors in their full force, but still obviously have an impact today. So Robbie, I can't thank you enough for your time today, and I hope we get to do this again.
All right, man. Yeah, I hope so. That would be great.
So we go from one guitar legend and I want to talk about another. I did mention, I believe I was on the episode with Laura Jane Grace, that was the day that the news broke that Eddie Van Halen passed away. And it came as kind of a shock, even though he was ill for a while, but I think the general public, and rightfully so, wasn't sure how, I guess, bad it was. So it was still a shock overall, but I wanted to do and talk about Eddie with justice, with somebody who knows a lot more than I do about Eddie Van Halen and Van Halen in general. I mean, I'm a huge fan, but Greg Renoff, he's a bigger fan because he's actually written books about Van Halen. Greg, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on, taking some time.
Hey, appreciate it. Nice to talk.
I know last time it was one of the first few episodes that I did in quarantine. So it was the episode 184, and we had a fun talk about the debut albums of Van Halen versus Appetite for Destruction. So there was a fun conversation there, and we'll try to make this as fun as possible because I know it is a sad subject, and your Twitter feed has been a wealth of information about Eddie, and it's been something to behold. So if you can kind of just maybe take us through that day for you. I mean, I know you're an insider, but you're not like obviously a Van Halen family insider. So were you caught off guard by the news that Eddie had passed?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think, you I would say people have been whispering things about his health over the last year or so. And, the Van Halen family is a very tight-knit group. And, the information that would get out would be what I would say is kind of unreliable. I mean, you just never knew. I mean, I think it was kind of a general understanding that Ed was not 100%. Last year, there were a lot of stories that people probably remember that they were going to tour. Dave Roth had talked about, at the beginning of 2019, he was talking about, or the end of 2018, they're going to go on the road and they're going to do stadiums with Foo Fighters and Yankee Stadium, and people were excited. And that didn't happen. And I think, my view from afar was that probably something had gone wrong with somebody with the health in the band, and the odds were it was probably Eddie, because it seemed like that was going to be the final lap for those guys. Basically, that really was going to be the final victory lap for those guys, and it didn't happen. And so when the news did break that day, actually, I just happened to be at my computer and saw it, and it was just one of these surreal moments where you look at something, you can't quite believe the words. It was the TMZ tweet that said Eddie Van Halen has passed away. That kind of popped up on my feed when I first opened my phone, and then I went to Wolfie's page, and he had put out the information 5 minutes earlier or something. And it was, for me, pretty much my entire musical, like 95, 98%, 99% of my musical existence as a rock fan has been, Van Halen's been part of that. I got started a few years earlier than that, maybe listening to records or whatever, but sort of once I got to Van Halen, it was all Van Halen for me as one of my top bands. And it's kind of hard to imagine a world without Eddie Van Halen, and that's the thing that's been difficult. So I think, for me, I like anybody else, I think was shocked when the news came, even though sort of had this feeling that Ed's health wasn't 100%, that he was not, that he wasn't able to tour. Basically, that was sort of what you gather from 2019, and then their relative inactivity in 2020, obviously, when nothing was going on. So it was, it was hard to hear the news.
Oh yeah, of course. And I thought the rumor was, I guess I missed that. I thought the rumor was actually going to be GNR and Van Halen. Maybe that was just wishful thinking on my part. Maybe it was a dream that I had. But Foo Fighters and Van Halen would have been amazing. And I got to say, I know you've seen them. How many times have you seen them? You don't have to go to the each show because I don't know if you can.
Oh, probably about 10 times. There are people who've seen them like way more than I have. It's amazing. You talk to people who've seen them 40, 50, 60 times. But yeah, so about 10 times.
Okay. Well, I'm lucky I got to see them once. And this was one of the Madison Square Garden shows. And I just, because I had seen David Lee Roth before. It was like, it's changed so many different names. This small little venue with like a circular stage on Long Island, and that's when he had the long hair with extensions, and it was still Diamond Dave. It was great, and same thing with Van Halen when they reunited. It was still great, but I just remember being beside myself watching Eddie, and that's not something I normally do. I'm a kind of like a front man kind of guy, but I'm like, I can't believe this is what I'm witnessing right now. This is Eddie Van Halen, and which is why it's we got to see these bands whenever we can, and that's why I'm so blessed. Robbie Krieger is 74, and he's still, he's still out there. He plays when he can. And Eddie, 65 is too young. The first thing that I thought of, and I'm glad, maybe we could shed some insight on it, was how long that Sammy Hagar tried to reconcile that relationship. And that broke my heart, in addition to just, the loss of the rock world, but the family, and just on a human level. But then we find out, it may have been through Howard Stern that we found out that they did reconcile through texting. So did you know anything about that until the news broke, or before the news broke, rather, that they reconciled? Did you hear any buzz about Michael Anthony?
Well, I'll tell you, I actually did. I actually had heard something about that there had been basically a breaking of the ice. And again, it's one of these things where I'm not, I'm removed enough from the situation where I hear it, and it's just sort of, you have to take it at face value for what it is and just sort of move on. But I wasn't totally surprised that may have happened, because I'll tell you why. Because Eddie and Ted Templeman sat down in the fall of last year and had basically just a visit, like a social visit, catching up. They'd texted and had emails and whatnot over the years, but kind of they hadn't really been face to face in quite a while. So, it seemed like Eddie was kind of reaching out to old friends, and just sort of, that's what I kind of gathered from that it was that Eddie seemed very interested and wanted to get together with Ted, just to sort of, it's basically Eddie's when he was talking to Ted was, it's been so long, man, we have to get together. When do you want to get together? He was, he was up and ready to do that. And so, when I heard that supposedly was happening, that there had been some sort of breaching of that barrier where Sammy and Ed had been, whatever, there'd been sort of whatever reconciliation there had been. It seemed plausible to me, just maybe that, that maybe Ed had kind of realized his time was running short and wanted to sort of have those moments with people that, even if there's been tension in the past, whatever it is, that he wanted to sort of have that closure. And so that was what I'd heard. And of course, I didn't know it was actually true until I saw that Sammy came out and, and said that, yes, he had been texting with Ed. And, in all seriousness, the thing for me is that I think it was a super important thing for Sammy, and I'm sure on some level it was important for Ed too. I mean, especially because Sammy has been public about it, and people have tested his motivation or questioned his motivations about why he would be so public about his interest in reconciling. But I take it for what it's worth on some level, which is if you work so long with a person, and even if there's been intense personal differences, it's it's sort of like American Hustle, those guys on the road and working and having that tremendous success they did writing songs. I mean, it's it's a very close relationship when you're writing songs like that in a band like that, where you're basically two guys kicking around ideas and thinking about different riffs and how melodies go. And there's that platinum records and the Billboard Awards and all the other stuff that goes on. It's a different it's a different level of intimacy than just friends. And so I can imagine that would be something that for Sammy was important, even though, as we all know, there's been some obvious things that have caused problems between their relationship. I think those are fairly public. And so I was, I as I said, I heard that back in March or something. I'd heard kind of a whisper about that, and I was just, not knowing whether it was true or not. And just was when that news broke that Sammy said he did that, I was glad, because I think that would have been, difficult for Sammy to have thought that it never happened. It just to kind of, close the door and know that you could just sort of say, hey man, whatever differences we had, it was a good run, and it's good to be your friend, that type of thing.
Yeah, to get closure. I mean, that's such a human thing. And that as much as we as fans, we want to know these things. We want to know that Sammy and Eddie are talking again, and, the fun of just rumor reunion talks. But it's kind of how I thought of also, obviously, given my, kind of what I do, I think about Axl and Slash. And
sure.
While they haven't done any press together, there's also a part of me that thinks it's none of our business, as long as they're cool, as long as whatever, pain maybe they had, that they were kind of suffering, that this person they had such a long relationship with is over.
Right.
I know some people will second guess that, money cures all, but I don't think that's the
Sure.
case. I really don't. I think when you're at that level, when you're at Eddie's level, Sammy's level, Axl and Slash, you don't need to do that. You could be successful, and they all proved to be successful in different projects without each other.
Right.
So it just made me feel
Right.
good. And of course, I just can't help but just think of like other bands, but it's just, I think it's just really nice. I think it's closure for the fans to know after the fact, to deal with the pain and the loss of Eddie. So if you could,
well, I mean, in speaking of what you just said about Robbie Krieger, I think about, I was a pretty big Doors fan as a younger person. I remember reading interviews in Cream magazine with Manzarek and the other guys in the Doors about whether the sense of Denzel Moore being angry or Manzarek just being sad he never got a chance to say goodbye. That just I never really got a chance to say goodbye to my friend. Hey, I'm going to Paris. Okay, man, have a good time. I'll see you when you get back. And it never, you never had a chance to say goodbye. And I presume Eddie and Sammy maybe not had that chance to say goodbye, but they, at least it was on good terms, and it was sort of a sense that, okay, I presume that Sammy had an idea that Ed's health wasn't 100% and was able to kind of, get his head right about that type of, those types of interactions with the person, when that, hey, you never know what tomorrow brings. This person is in the perfect health. So I think that's nice for fans to know. And I think for Sammy, it's got to be a healing thing for, because it would have been, I imagine it would have been rough. You would have just felt really like there was a lot of missed opportunities, and maybe I could have done more as a person to make, maybe to reach out, or maybe to try to make amends to somebody who obviously felt wronged in some way, meaning Eddie by Sammy, whatever the truth may be. But that's, pretty much the basis. There was something there that was definitely between them, business, personal, whatever it was. It didn't make communication easy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Of course, keeping on topic with the Doors, because you don't have a chance to say goodbye. I mean, again, that's life, and what they seem to have had was the closest thing to it, and it just makes me feel good. It's a silver lining to come out of this terrible thing. I want to ask you this, and Eddie Trunk tweeted about it, and it was interesting to read the thread. When someone like Eddie Van Halen passes away, or when when Neil Peart passed away, the sales of Rush goes up, the sales of or the streaming of Van Halen goes up.
Right.
How do you look at that? The same thing with Christian. Do you look at that as like? Because I never looked at it as like, oh, it's a poser thing for people to go back. Like, shouldn't you own all these records? I look at it just like young fans either discovering them for the first time, or maybe if it's like me, it's like you guys got to get it out of your system. Like, it's kind of how you grieve, is just listen to all their music.
Right.
So how do you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a combination of both. I think there's obviously the anyone from a casual fan to like the woman who drove around with 5150 in her car and maybe moved on from Van Halen after that, never really had an album, and maybe she's 60 now and then she's going to revisit that record again because it brings back some memories for her because Eddie's passed away. And then there's people who don't know, and I think the thing that I would say is that the global outpouring of affection and tribute was really incredible. A friend of mine said to me that for him it was a super depressing moment because he was like, it felt like Prince again. And basically his three favorite musical things when he grew up on Long Island, he was saying it was Prince, it was Michael Jackson, and it was Van Halen and Eddie Van Halen. And he's like, I feel like my childhood is now completely gone, that part of it. And so, part of it is just, I think it became such a media event. And I don't mean like a spectacle, like, sometimes there's these tragedies where people die in car crashes or something, and it's this big spectacle. I just mean more like just that everywhere you looked, there were people from all around the world, from super famous people to just regular fans tweeting and posting and talking about the affected Van Halen. I mean, Chris Rock is a huge Van Halen fan. I mean, there's like, you search and like, there are like Asian politicians in Japan who are paying tribute to Van Halen. It's just it was kind of an international band more than I think people even knew. And just the music was so great. I mean, that's the thing too. You realize the songs really have sustained and are just part of the DNA of people's musical lives. And so for me, that's part of it too. It just was so present everywhere. I think a lot of people, maybe like you said, young people who were just like, oh, my dad's talked about Van Halen, but I never listened to them. I'm going to listen to the first three songs on Spotify. And no, I like Jump. Oh, I like this song. This is cool. And so I think for that standpoint, it's nice. I mean, the last thing I'll say is that, we're in this era where an album comes out from Bruce Springsteen and it hardly makes a note in of publicity, not because it may not be good, but it's just because there's so much stuff being pushed at you all the time, and so to be able to have that, unfortunately, by Eddie's death, it sort of overwhelms everything. And sort of like, it sort of transcends, it becomes quote unquote, for lack of sort of like trending, it's like trending news at the top. It's a special thing because I think it shows how popular Van Halen was, if that makes sense. It's like, there are plenty of people who I have musical respect for who have passed away in the last 10 years, but it obviously never reached anywhere near the level of adulation and just sort of outpouring of sadness and passion and people talking about it. So for me, I think it's cool that there's that much, attention for what I think is great music for a number of reasons. And, anytime anyone listens to a Van Halen song for the first time, I think, okay, that's cool. Maybe it's not for you, but maybe you're just going to be like, wow, this is amazing. As a kid, I my uncle turned me onto the Doors. My uncle he gave me Between the Buttons by the Rolling Stones when I was pretty young, like 8 or 9, and didn't make me like the biggest Rolling Stones fan in the world, but it was definitely a good introduction to be like, oh, this is different than what's on the radio, in the late 70s or something. It was cool, like there's something else out there. And so for me, I hope that's what's going to go on. There's so many kids who are going to kind of have that start for them. Like, I still like the Stones today. I still like the Doors today because of that introduction when I was very, very young to those bands before I even knew about Van Halen.
Especially in pop culture, that's something that, I've always noticed, but never really sunk in about the Van Halen references in pop culture, whether it's, Bill and Ted. I think it was a newer Family Guy episode where, did you see that? Where Peter was supposed to read the book 1984, but You see that one? But he said,
I did the clip on Twitter. Yeah.
It's so funny. It was like his first time, but the librarian gave him the CD of 1984, and it was a whole episode dedicated to Van Halen. And
yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like everything from like Super Bad to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I mean, you could go on like everybody. Better Off Dead. I mean, there's so many.
You see the South Park one when it brought the Middle East together. Van Halen.
Yeah, brought the Middle East together. Right.
Whoa. I mean, that's what it just. Sometimes you sit back, and I think that goes into all the streaming. It's like there's so much to appreciate, and obviously we wish there was even more, especially since he's gone. But it's just it's something else, and I wish I got to see him in his prime. I'm just glad I got to see him at least once. I will ask you because I know you have, as we're all working from home, you have children running around. What do you have a favorite Eddie moment, whether it's personal or just Eddie in general, something that really stands out to you, whether it's an interview, whether it's a performance,
right?
Like maybe what comes out, what comes to mind?
If you had asked me that a month ago, I would have said something different. But I'll tell you what's been really, and I watched this when it came out, was a Smithsonian interview with Ed that happened in 2015, where he went to the Smithsonian in Washington and was interviewed about his upbringing and about his immigrant story and about his guitars, and took questions from the audience. And watching that, I was so glad that happened, and I don't know exactly who organized that to make that happen. I think it was most likely it was his wife, Janie, who was the one who sort of encouraged those types of things. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect that's who it was. And I'm so glad that happened, because it put Ed on a stage where his story could be told outside of a quote unquote rock context. I mean, there were plenty of rock fans there, kids who grew up on Van Halen music were there, who were adults, plenty of people there. But for him to talk about how his family came to America and, faced the struggles they faced, whether it would be him being picked on as a kid because he was different, didn't speak English, or just how they worked, and him talking about how he missed his father so much. And someone asked him a question about who would you wish you could jam with in heaven, and he basically said, I wish I could jam with my father again. And it put him on the proper platform as someone who was more than just a guitar player, because he really was. As we were talking about these pop culture references, the band is iconic, and that's overused. And I can think of maybe like 10 or 12 bands that are still like going or were going in the last 5 years that deserve that title of iconic. They really were something that was beyond just a cool band with songs. They represented a great musical achievement by a guitar player, and one of the great frontmen in history, and of course the songs. I mean, that's the thing. Just they represented something about the 80s and something about rock music and virtuosity and all these things that I think on that platform we're talking about Ed's personal achievements and his own way he made his, basically how he made his way to that point in time from this kid who came to America, didn't speak English. That's my favorite moment to watch now, because it's really kind of puts him in the right framework for people to think about. It was more than just a guy who picked up a guitar and could play fast. You know what I mean? There was a lot more to that story and a lot more talent there than 99.999% of people who ever picked up a guitar. I mean, that's the truth. And it was really a wonderful thing. And I'm really glad it's going to be preserved forever, because that's what I'd like, people to remember the Eddie Van Halen, not as the guy who partied or, did that, but just as the guy who really overcame a lot and stuck with it and had family bonds that were really tight with his brother. And they played together. In fact, I was talking about this on Twitter. I'm pretty sure that Alex never played live outside of the context of Van Halen. He may have played with Sammy on guitar or whatever, like other guitarists, like Dave picked up a guitar, but never played live, as far as I know, ever from 1978 to today, outside the context of Van Halen in a concert setting without his brother. So, to think about that type of commitment to like a unit, it's a pretty moving story.
It is, and I know the clip a certain part of that interview that you were talking about, because Wolf shared it online.
Yep.
Where
shared it. Yep.
So that was cool. So I got to say, other than of course following, and it's been really nice, because I know it's what it's like as as a son losing a father. To share that stuff on. I mean, I am comfortable sharing about it sometimes on a podcast, and I'm a nobody. But to him to be on where the world's watching and him to share these intimate photos has just been. Where I think his fans are grateful that he's doing that. So In addition to, follow Wolf on Twitter, but follow Greg Renoff on Twitter. I mean, it's really been an education, even before all this, of course, about Van Halen. It's been really cool to see all these people reaching out to you and you retweeting them and sharing stories. And, it's been really a Van Halen 101 from you. So if you don't have either of Professor Greg Renoff's books, Van Halen Rising, or he just did the biography of Ted Templeman. That was what we were talking about last time when you were on the show.
Yep.
Get him now. But in the meantime, it's like you're writing a book almost every day on Twitter. So just thank you for doing what you do.
I'm only laughing because I wish it was easy to send 2 tweets and you're done with your book. I wish.
I know, but I'm telling you, it's I just enjoy it. There's like sometimes I won't call out any names, but sometimes there are people who tweet too much, and I'm like, I gotta mute you. I like you, but I can't deal with it. I love it. I really do.
Okay, well, it's good to know. I appreciate it.
So
appreciate it very much.
You got it. And I appreciate your time, Greg, today, and hopefully next time we'll talk about we'll convene on a happier note next time.
Absolutely. Rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen. Appreciate it very much. It was a great conversation.
You got it. Thanks so much, Greg.
No problem.
Rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen. Indeed. I kind of had to get that out of my system too, because, I Van Halen, I love the band. Not as much to do a podcast. I'm not as knowledgeable to do a podcast about Eddie Van Halen. So I wanted to talk to an expert. So thank you, Greg, for coming on. And, it's what I tweeted. Some of you responded to it before I knew that Eddie had reconnected, reconciled with Sammy Hagar. I couldn't help but think of Izzy Stradlin and Steven Adler. And Steven, he rejoined. He was part of Not in This Lifetime, a couple shows, but he seemed, and I don't think this is why he's not doing interviews right now. I think he seemed a little bothered, feeling that he could do more. He was, of course, happy to have those moments again. If I could speak for Steven, but these are things that he said. But he wanted to do more. He was kind of upset that he flew, to Argentina to do a song or two. So you wonder what the friendship is like, I'm sure, he's still friends with Slash, but what is it with Axl? I mean, that's a brotherhood forever. Appetite for Destruction is a brotherhood forever with those 5 guys. What is it like now with Izzy Stradlin? Through Alan Niven, we found out on this podcast that he was going to be a part of it. For what the actual role was going to be, we weren't sure, but he showed up, whether it be, I guess Alan wasn't too sure of these details, or if they've been kind of debunked since, whether it was a sound check or he just showed up. Something bothered him and he left. And then Izzy tweeted that something about the money, that he didn't get the fair share. It wasn't an equal split with the loot, I believe was kind of that's a good paraphrase of what he said. So did that affect his relationship with Axl Rose? Because they remained friends. So you just don't know, because you want these guys, to reunite. We want our favorite band, the Appetite 5, to reunite, and it's no slight at all. I've said this multiple times to Richard Fortus, to Frank, to Melissa, even even Disney would be a part of it. But I mean, just like the Appetite 5, those guys who totally conquered the world with what is arguably the greatest rock and roll album ever made, not just debut, but ever made. And you just want them at a human level to all be cool with each other. It's unless, one of them, like if Axl ran over Izzy's dog or something like ridiculous like that, obviously that I'm just making up some like absurd circumstance that I would be like, okay, yeah, you guys shouldn't be friends. It's all better off left in the past. But if especially while, people are losing their lives or they're getting to that age. Yes, Eddie passed away of cancer, but we see that a lot. People getting cancer of 60, David Bowie, 70. They're getting up there. No one's hit 60 yet in the GNR world. And so I'm not trying to put them in the grave yet, but while they're all still here on this earth, can we make it happen once? Not just for a show. It doesn't have to be. If they did what just Eddie Van Halen and Sammy did, just behind the scenes, like we're cool, we reconciled. Maybe we just can't work out the business side of it, but on a human level, on a friend level, we're cool. I think that's also really important. The fans, aside from the music, aside from the concerts, especially with Guns N' Roses fans, we care about them as people. So how are they doing as people? And even though I was looking at, because I've been sharing a bunch of photos of Eddie Van Halen on Instagram, and I'm looking at the reunion photos where Eddie is kissing David Lee Roth right on the cheek. Can you imagine if Axl and Slash did something like that? So it just also, I guess, it leaves room to wonder, what is it like for them as human beings? And then the other side of the coin, do we deserve to know? It's not our business, I guess. We're in the business of listening to the music, going to the concert. So these are conversations that continue on social media and that we continue to have. And I really admire all your responses about these questions that I pose. So as we wrap up this episode, the conversation continues on social media, facebook.com/the AFD show, Twitter @the AFD show, Instagram, as I mentioned, Appetite for Distortion, YouTube. Just look up Appetite for Distortion on YouTube, putting a bunch of all the interviews up there, at least like all the Zoom ones. The first 65 were up there for a while with the help of Raz Q. And then it just became, I just couldn't keep up with it. But now at a very primitive level, have learned how to edit video, or at least slap on some photos and put the audio with it. So I've been putting all the new episodes on YouTube. And let me just thank, before I forget, this is from iOS Life. I think it was G from Ireland. He was the one that we had a conversation about, the Izzy Stradlin documentary that he made by himself, and how hard is it to make an Izzy Stradlin documentary, a Guns N' Roses documentary, with the lack of information that's out there. So it is out there now. You just have to go to iOS Life on Twitter, and then you'll see all his links, AYEWIS Life. And the reason I bring him up is that he made me new logos, if you've noticed. So actually you have, because I've gotten so many compliments, and I didn't even ask for them. So he's made me brand new Appetite for Distortion logos. And he also made me, and I just shared it using a clip from the interview I did with Stone Gossard. It's like a spinning record with the new logo. So it's kind of like an animated way to look at and to listen to an interview. So I just got to thank him for all of that. And also, you may have seen when I announced Robbie Krieger was coming on the show, he made this Jack Daniels looking thing, with announcing my guest. So he did that all out of just the kindness of his heart. So just thank you. And I'm going to use, and I suggest wait. Let me just say that, because I did post it. I took it down. T-shirts. Yes, T-shirts. I talked about, oh my God, how long has it been when I since mentioned T-shirts? It could be like a year ago. I'm making them. I am making them. Okay. So it's, wait for the big announcement. I think what I should have done is let me wait until I get mine and let me inspect it first. And then let me start announcing it, because I kind of got paranoid. I'm like, what if they're shitty? They shouldn't be. So, but T-shirts are coming. Stickers are coming. So that's going to be really fun, because many of you have been asking for those for years. And finally, I got off my ass, and, well, you know what? I think finally I felt good about it, because the new logo,
The lame ass security, I'm going home.